Let's start it. Okay, almost everyone. So good afternoon, almost evening. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this event. I am Aurora. I'm the event manager of Transitions, and this is the second event that I tried to organize with the staff. I hope we're going to enjoy it as much as the first one that we held back in November. I'm here to host the fourth event for the journal for Transitions, linked to the launch of a new issue, which is in this case the one on humor studies. Somebody's speaking. If you're new here at Sapienza, or you've never followed our activity or the journal or in the project, I just want to briefly introduce the project to you. Transitions is the postgraduate journal. Excuse me, I will ask everyone to turn off the audio. Okay, I did it for you. So Transitions, what is it? It's the postgraduate journal of literary studies, but also of linguistic disciplines and literature in general, which is run by students of the Master in English and Anglo-American Studies at Sapienza University of Rome. This project started with the idea of sharing knowledge in the field of humanities and to enhance the cooperation between students and professionals such as scholars or professors, etc. We try to follow the lead of our university master in English studies in being as international as possible. And that is why we welcome students and we work with students and professors from different countries, cultures, and the fact that we publish in English, it's because English is the language that we indeed chose for one reason or another to use in our academic environment, let's say. Now I'd like to start the event in a minute or so because our editors are going to explain very well the topic of the event. And we're going to listen to our two special guests for today, who are Professor Wardu and Professor Ranzato, whom I thank you very much to be with us and for sharing their time with us. We also have the opportunity then to hear a discussion on the works of two of the authors of this new issue that wrote two articles, and that you're going to read them fully on the website. The issue is already out, so you just need to click on our website and go read it after the workshop tonight. So those who want to participate in the workshop, we also have the chance to work directly with the two authors of the articles on some extracts, and we're going to do some practical exercise. So as you might have understood by now, the field of humor studies is going to be the protagonist of our discussion. And I think this may be a completely new field for many of us, since it seems to me, at least, that it is not really deepened at university. And during my career or my university path, I haven't had the chance to study it a lot. So I will be happy to hear some feedbacks also from the audience and other students. If there are any foreign students, I'd like to hear from them if this field is more developed at their home country or their home universities. I just want to mention that it is an accredited subject and research field. And there's also an International Society for Humor Studies. It is a really interesting website full of interesting materials that you can go have a look if this is going to attract your attention tonight. So, well, there's much to do and to learn, and I don't want to dwell on the introduction too much. Therefore, I will leave the floor to the first two of the three editors of this upcoming issue that you're gonna read, and they are Verdiana Carpinelli and Giulia Prosperi. So here you are. they're going to talk a little bit about this new issue. So I will leave the floor to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Aurora. Thanks to everyone. Actually, I would like to stress how grateful I am for being here, showing this project. I'm incredibly thankful to all of my colleagues who make it possible, obviously my co-editors and the professors who we are hosting here right now. And yes, I would like to start with an observation on the title of our issue, that is, what are you laughing at? Humor in transition across time and space. As you can see, we have an idiomatic expression that is, what are you laughing at? And wanted to actually start thinking about what it is that actually makes people laugh, what it is that moves us to laughter. And the topic of time and space is obviously influenced and affected by our point of view as linguists. So it's a linguistic and multilingual point of view, as Verdiana will show us when she will talk about humor studies in a more thorough way. Actually, when we first started thinking about the title, it was, it was a catchphrase, it was a joke. But as time went on, with Russia declaring war to Ukraine, it actually started seeming, looking like a kind of accusation, because there was not that much to laugh about in the world. Actually, this is, it can offer a point of view on how laughter is a universal language, is indeed part of a much more broad universal language, that is the one of human emotions and expressions. On this subject, the University of London in 2010 published an article which has been published by The Telegraph, which showed how two very different cultural backgrounds, like the one of the African people and the one of the British people, were actually connecting themselves just looking at each other. They did not understand what the person they were talking to was saying, but they could understand it by the prosody, the rhythm, and actually they were able to grasp the emotion which laid on the background of what they were saying. This is the reason why we can always immediately understand if someone is saying something witty, something funny, and we are immediately much more at ease in the context. And this can, for example, help in the classroom when teaching or learning a language. And the anthropological and social explanation is even more based on the biological condition of human beings and our species as mammals and as human species that has the possibility of learning through laughter. In fact, some mother mammals have been found showing and teaching their sons through laughter, so that there is a much more intertwined connection. It's much more easier to grasp and it's much more effective. Another important aspect of the contest, in the context in which the draft for this issue came up, is that of the pandemic. We were getting out of the pandemic. It was the late October, early November, but still we were coming from a moment where we were home. Many of us had quarantined, so we had understood how much sarcasm and wit could help people coping with society, with the problems of society, coping with the sensation that was real of isolation. So the spread of memes as a way of communicating. You could ask, how are you doing, to your friend, or you could send him a meme. So it was another way of keeping in touch and feeling as part of a community. So we wanted to stress how much interesting and serious, if you allow me to say, humor studies are. And I will now leave the floor to Bertiana for an actual representation of all the applications of the field. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, hi everyone, and thank you, Julia, for giving me the word and leaving the stage. Hi everyone, and thank you again on my behalf and behalf of all the transition team for coming here today, because today is a glorious day for transitions. The fourth issue is out, the main issue, and we are really thrilled to present it today. So as Julia said, the topic was the one of humor, and we decided to present and to write about the humor and collect all these amazing contributions we had about humor, because we found out, we basically analyzed how this represents an integral and central part of our everyday life, as a person, as a single person, and as people part of a group. And as Julia said, is a part of a coping mechanism with what surrounds us in this particular moment in history. So I will try not to bore you, I swear, I promise, but I'll just give you like a few definitions of what humor is and from where we started. So we started analyzing what this topic was, and not surprisingly, we found out that this was a very complex matter and subject. And indeed, many linguists and scholars that have based their studies, the years of studies on this subject, they revealed how it is quite impossible to find a clear-cut definition of what humor is, and especially of all the internal subdivision and the applications and meanings of what humor that humor can have. So basically, humor has been defined more of an umbrella term that encompasses a series of implications and meanings that probably sound familiar to many of us, and they also might sound similar to one another. So for example, satire, parody, irony, puns, wordplays, these are all forms of humor, but they're not equivalent, because what changes among them is also the messages they want to convey and what is the meaning they want to carry out. So this turned to be a very complex matter, and the research field that deals with this complex matter is in turn very complex and multi-layered and interdisciplinary, because what we noticed is that when we share a joke with friends, the first level of analysis that we of course notice is the one of the language. So we just, you know, especially when we, I don't know, send memes that are in English or in any other language, we just focus on the language. But then there's a whole stratification. There are a lot of layers that need to be taken into account. So there's the social one, the cultural one, all the culture specific references that are very interesting to render in another language for the target language. And we just wonder why does that make me laugh, and how would that make laugh other people that don't understand the language we're talking into. So basically, to deal with this complex, the complex subject of humor, there is another very complex field of research that is humor studies, because in turn, just like humor, it is multi-layered, and it has a variety of academic fields included in it, just like linguistics, but also psychology, anthropology, communication studies, translation studies, and so on. So we decided to focus on this matter that is an aspect of our everyday life and is deeply interconnected with the language in use. So every day we just read and experience expressions of humor. And what we wanted to pose the attention on, and we were very lucky because we received a lot of contributions and they were very, very inspiring, was we wanted to pose the attention on the different forms and means of expressing humor. So Michela will then, the third editor of this issue, will then just give us an overview of all the pieces of writing that we have collected in this fourth issue. But we were very lucky, and again, I am, and we are so grateful for all the authors that decided to contribute to the fourth issue, because we had the possibility to range from what is probably the most known and popular to the public audience, that is the English satire of the 18th century. So we have a piece on that, and then we just move on to the more up-to-date expressions of humor. So like, for example, in video games, so just the political cartoons dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. So that was very up-to-date. And then also audiovisual translation, so with TV series that we all watch and experience in our everyday life. So this was the presentation of what were the milestones of our research. And I will just give the stage back to Aurora so that she can lead us for the rest of the event today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Veriana, and thank you very much, Julia. We are going to be together in the workshop as well, so you will see them back. And now I want to spend a few words about Professor Mary Wharton, who's here tonight. Before giving her the floor, I just wanted to say that she's Associate Professor of English Language and Translation Studies at Sapienza. And her research field includes translation theory, and she is also a freelance translator. Therefore, I'm asking to you, Professor, since you've been working in a multilingual environment for a while, and especially in translation, we'd like to hear from you your contribution on what it means to work on cases of humor while translating literature.
Okay, thank you very much, and congratulations on your new issue of the journal. Yes, well, as you say, you can approach the question obviously from different angles, both theoretical and practical. So I thought I would talk a little bit about a kind of practical example. Usually when I'm teaching, we're looking at translation mostly from English into Italian. When I'm translating from Italian into English. So the situation is reversed. So the example I'm going to show you is from something from a text that I translated quite a few years ago now, because unfortunately most of the things that I do translate are not particularly humorous, so there aren't a huge amount of examples. But I think that the translation of humour is one of those areas in translation practice that really provides sort of fertile ground for creativity by the translator, because you're forced somehow by the language itself to move away from the guidelines provided by the source text, especially when the humour is created through wordplay rather than sort of situational humour. And you need also to be aware, as you were mentioning earlier, of the cultural aspects of the different types of humour. I think I would perhaps adjust slightly what Julia was saying earlier. I think it's true that all cultures have a sense of humour, but we don't necessarily all laugh at the same thing or in the same way. Something that might be ironic for me might be offensive to somebody else, and therefore you need to kind of have your sensibilities about you. And even within the same language, certainly in the case of English, we need to take into consideration differences between, for example, British and American humour that are not necessarily always parallel. So the example that I was going to, that I thought I could just show you quickly is taken from, well, the initial text that some of you, most of you, especially if you've studied French, are probably familiar with, is Raymond Queneau's Exercice de Style, which is a text where Queneau takes two very short paragraphs that form a sort of, this is the text, a sort of inconsequential story that he then rewrites 99 times in different styles. So as a police report, using the past tense, as a dialogue, only using onomatopoeia, etc. And here, this is the Italian translation that was translated famously by Umberto Eco, and Umberto Eco writes an introduction, an introductory essay on how Queneau produces humour and how Eco himself approached the question of translating that humour into his Italian translation. So years after the Eco translation, there was a volume produced by the translator that you're probably familiar with, the translation journal on, it's actually called Translating Humour, it's a special issue, where they wanted to publish an English translation of Eco's essay, and they asked me to translate it. So, for example, in this section, and I'll copy it into the chat for you so that you can see the actual language, because especially for our non-Italian students, it might not be.
Thank you very much, Professor. I was going to do it, but...
Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
So, ecco, I'll just read the very short passage. Indubbiamente, se noi diciamo che il calzolaio ha studiato alle scuole elementari, facciamo ridere e l'effetto è ottenuto solo metaplasticamente mediante un'operazione di soppressione parziale. So you can see we take one letter out of scuole and we end up with suole. Ma perché fa meno ridere dire che il calzolaio ha studiato alle scuole alimentari, dove si attua un altro metaplasma, questa volta di soppressione più aggiunzione, e che semanticamente il calzolaio è più collegato alle suole che non all'alimentazione. Okay, so in this sort of worldview, we have a closer connection between cobblers and shoes than cobblers and food. And this is why it's funny. Now, I had to translate this into English, and obviously I couldn't maintain the same joke, but I was forced in this case to maintain a joke in the same place, so I couldn't choose the option of compensation, of moving it somewhere else in the text, or of eliminating it, the sort of 0 degree of translation, which often is the case. So there was this constraint, in this case, a formal constraint based on the construction of the humour, having to respect the mechanism that Umberto Eco describes, but I wasn't tied at all as to the content of the joke, because it really doesn't matter whether it's about cobblers and shoes or anything else. And so there was kind of free reign from that point of view. So to approach this, I find that one of the kind of a sort of linguistic brainstorming, thinking about all sorts of connections, associations, homophones, and in the case of written translation, so this wouldn't be suitable for audio-visual, but to think also of homographs. And in fact, the solution I came up with only works on the page because it relies on the spelling and not on the sound, well, also on the sound, but it wouldn't work in a spoken oral audio-visual text. And so I'll show you if I find the, okay, this is the English, and I'll find you what I wrote. Okay, so, and this is the passage. Of course, if we were to say that King Midas has a guilt complex, so obviously here we're thinking about guilt complex as in senso di colpa, which would be guilt with a U, but we remove the U. In English, guilt, golden, and guilt, colpa, are homophones, but as you can see, they're spelt differently. We have a comic effect obtained purely metaplastically by means of partial suppression. Why is it then that King Midas has a quilt complex is less funny, despite being, again, an example of metaplasm, suppression and simple addition? It's because semantically, King Midas is more closely associated to guilt than to quilts. So obviously there could have been thousands of other possible solutions. But I think it's through practicing these kinds of examples without because I think that usually in what we do at university, we tend often to be looking at other translations and analysing them, commenting them, which is a first step. We can try and improve to make suggestions on existing translations. But certainly forcing yourself to come up with a solution in a situation like this will then, I think, inform your study of the theory. I think you understand the theory better. The two, it's a sort of feedback loop where the theory helps with the practice and the practice informs the theory. So I would leave it there and hand back over to you. And then perhaps if you want another example of something else later, we can talk about it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor. Thank you. Let me put it back. Here you go. Thanks a lot. And I think we were all taking notes of the titles and everything, because that was a perfect introduction for the cases of humor in translation that we're going to analyze later on. And first, right now, I'd like to name Michela Adinolfi, the first, well, another of the 3 editors of this issue, so that she can tell us something more about the 2 authors of the issue that are here with us. And so thank you, Michela. I don't know if you're here. Yes. Yes. And I will leave you the floor.
Thank you very much, Aurora. Thank you, everyone. And it was very interesting to hear the examples brought forward by Professor Burdell. And actually, in our issue, there will be several examples of how tricky it could be to find solutions when you have to balance different needs according to what your purpose is in translating a text. I just wanted to give you, before we delve into Martina Didizio and Elisa Orsetti's contributions, which are 2 of the authors we will be working with today, I wanted to give you a brief outlook on our whole issue. So I would just illustrate very quickly what we will be talking about. So we will have a journey, let's say, that starts with literature. And our first contribution is from Veridiana Carpinelli, which is also one of our editors. And she will examine Jonathan Swift's collection of satirical pamphlets known as the Bickerstaff Partridge Papers, where he gives a brilliant parodic imitation of the Royal Society's much hailed, but yet quite perceived as misleading language of modern sciences, but applied to astrology. And Swift uses this as a tool to demystify this very controversial field, but also as a tool to alert the contemporary audience to the need for a sharper critical outlook on reality beyond any linguistic construction. So it's a very interesting piece that will bring us back in time to see how humor could be used as a weapon by this important author. But then we have Martina Didizio's contribution, which will be we will examine in further detail later. And she will analyze how the use of language in the creation of humor in audiovisual products is important, especially when we have 2 versions, one British and one American, of a very popular TV show, which is The Office. Martina carries out a pragmatic analysis on how the construction of dialogues mirrors and also is shaped to adapt to the different perceptions of humor in these 2 different cultural milieus. We will also have a contribution by Safael Kura that will extend the investigation of humor's construction mechanism to the social-political domain, and she will examine Steve Bell's satirical cartoons, which were published in The Guardian during the COVID-19 pandemic. And her piece is interesting because she provides an interesting multimodal perspective on how the public sentiment of discontent is voiced and addressed by combining graphic representations and language in a very vehement attack towards controversial political figures and decisions. Then we will come to more specifically to translation. with the remaining two contributions in the academic writing section of the issue, which both dwell on the specific challenges posed by the transfer of humor into a different language. We have Giulia Mussolino's attempt at translating the video game Evil Pumpkin, The Lost Halloween into Italian. And it's very interesting because it offers a first-hand account of the translator's reasoning process and choices when dealing with humoristic expressions on wordplays, and also the struggles of successfully recreating an enjoyable experience for the player, which is the main goal of the game, of course. And then this section ends with an outlook on fansubbing and the production of an official subtitled version of the popular TV series, The Big Bang Theory, where Elisa Orsetti compares the official version, the official dubbed and the fansub version, illustrating how the unofficial translation actually tried to tackle what fans had perceived as a loss of humoristic import and the impoverishment of a characterization, while also trying to negotiate between comprehensibility for the target culture and preservation of the features that are a very distinctive element of this show. Then we have a section with creative writings. So one is Michela Gnonfi, that's me, my piece, which is a piece that imagines a dystopian future in which humor, especially in the form of corrosive political satire, is repressed and prohibited by an authoritarian government as a destabilizing factor. And in this respect, the use of language and its arbitrary modifications also become intertwined with the use of humor as a space of dissidence, where the status quo can be questioned and power can be ridiculed. And then the last piece, Michele Brugnetti's play, The Party, will transport us in a very different atmosphere, in a conversation among a restricted circle of friends who become the unknowing victims of the author's ironic gaze. And so it is a very pleasant piece, very aesthetically pleasing, I'm sorry. And both the characters on stage and their sophisticated language turns into a very subtle parody, because the subject of the speculation increasingly reveals their egocentric and self-praising nature. And so this is a piece very, very subtly and elegantly ironic, which concludes our issue. Just as a final note, I would like to spend a few more words on the pieces of Martina Di Tizio and Elisa Orsetti, which will also be the subject of our workshop later, because I think it is very interesting how both these authors dealt with the confrontation between different instances of humor. One in the British versus American debate, which is also a debate that has not even established truth. So it is still, the research on that is still ongoing, and the pragmatic analysis that Martina carries out is very interesting in bringing out this difference. And with regards to the Big Bang Theory, the fact that it is a show that is so popular, and every one of us might have thought on how to translate some jokes that were in this series, makes her contribution very interesting to analyze. So this is what we will see, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Michela. Thanks a lot. And I think after this introduction and general overview of what the issue will contain, I want to call Martina, and I want to ask directly something to you. Martina Di Tizio, welcome, and thank you to be with us. Does she hear me? Yes, she's there. I'm great. So my question is, let me put, here you go. I hope everybody sees you clearly. And my question about your article and your work is, so since in your article you talk about, you talk of humor almost from a pragmatic and linguistic point of view. Since you underline the differences between British English and American English. The thing is, that's a pragmatic analysis of the dialogue help in identifying different ways of creating humor, both in British English and American English. So I give you the floor.
All right. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Hopefully, yes. Go. Okay. So first of all, thank you for this question, because it was really interesting hearing all the contributions before now. And I think, yes, that a pragmatic analysis can help us identify those elements that we might implicitly know that makes a joke funny, but that we cannot actually point out. So, for example, in the case, for example, I decided to analyze a TV show because, well, first of all, it's a very famous TV show, so there's a lot of opinions on The Office. But I was also wondering, why is The Office funny in the same language, but in two different cultures? And I think that a pragmatic analysis can help us outline the characters and the jokes that they make and their humorous traits. So, for example, so I said that we have an implicit knowledge of what is funny, but we cannot say exactly what it is. So pragmatics can give us a way to rationalize these humorous factors in jokes, in TV shows, in characters. Usually we usually make very general statements, don't we? When we talk about a TV show, we say, oh, that TV show is so funny, or that comedian is so much funnier than this one. But we never know why. And so when I decided to do this, I got the inspiration from one of Professor Anzato's brilliant lessons on the issues in translating certain puns and jokes from a language and a different culture into another. And what I was watching, because we did this lesson with the British version of The Office, and having watched both of them, and I found them both very, very funny. But as I was watching the clip that she chose, I asked myself, okay, why is this funny? And why is the American version also funny? But the characters, that even though the scene is completely the same, and we will see also in the workshop how identical some scenes are, but the characters that they show are very different, and they're also their humor is quite different. And I thought, but it's in the same language. It's the premise is the same, the situation is the same, the character speaking is the same. What is different? And in comedy, usually it's very common to analyze the indirect speech acts that are pronounced, usually because they are the place where you have miscommunications, you have misinterpretations that usually leads to a humorous joke, to a humorous punchline. But usually direct speech acts are not really investigated, because they usually don't have the joke. But when I was watching The Office, and the British version is has a very deadpan comedy, so you don't have any laugh tracks, so you don't have anyone telling you, oh, that's where the joke is. It's very flat. So in order to understand also why the main character, David Brandt, played by Ricky Gervais, why is he so funny when it's all flat? So you have to, and why Michael Scott, that's the protagonist of the American version, why is he funny? And he is not really like that, but he tries to be just equally humorous, and it turns out it succeeds, because the American version of The Office is actually maybe the most popular, also because it has been going on for way more seasons than the British version. And so I noticed that using different speech acts for the characters actually outline their personalities, and also how these personalities are tailored to their respective audiences. For example, so different strategies are being employed in making them humorous. For example, David Brandt is someone who takes himself quite seriously, tries to be funny, but misses sometimes the punchline. And I discovered that that's something that British people really don't like, people who take themselves very seriously. The same thing doesn't translate well in Michael Scott in other scenes, and I selected a scene for the workshop that we'll look at later. But in the first scene, Michael Scott is quite a bit of a different character. And you can see that there's not the same awkwardness that is used in the British version, but rather it's full of cultural references. The punchline is usually more clear, and it's usually a more lovable character than David Brent, the British boss, is. And then because these speech acts are, so for example, in the first scene, the one I have analyzed, they are different. So one character uses more speech acts or different speech acts than the other one. So we can see that they have different personalities and that they correspond to a certain conception of humor. But then we have also other scenes that are almost identical. And when we look at the punchline, it doesn't really work, but we don't know why. And so, yes, so I think that a pragmatic analysis can actually help us, at least, if not just investigate, but also ask ourselves, why is this joke funny, and why so many people find it funny, and why some people don't find it funny, beside, of course, personal preferences. And I hope this answered the question. Thank you.
Yes, Martina, thank you. And that was really interesting. And we are going to dwell more on it during the workshop with some practical examples and exercises. So thank you for the introduction, theoretical introduction for the moment. And now I have the opportunity to host another professor, Irene Rantato. So welcome, Professor. I'm going to put you on screen. There you go.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Here you go. Wait. That's fine.
I'm very sorry. Just 1 second. I need to open the door. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No problem at all. No problem. Wait. In the meantime, I want to remind everyone that the issue is already on in the website. I can write the website in the chat. There you go. So you can go and have a look, and you can download it. You can read the whole foreword, the manifesto, reading all the reasons for the project and everything. And I want to remind everyone as well, to the audience, that the call for applicants for the editorial team is still open. So if you wish to participate, she's back. I was only telling something to the audience. If you want to participate in the project, I will give you more details at the end of the launch event. So, Professor, welcome back.
Sorry, I've been on my own all this time, but now.
And now it's the moment. So, about we want to ask you something as well, but I will introduce you first, as I did with Professor Wardle. Professor Randato is Associate Professor at Sapienza, and she teaches audiovisual translation and English language, if I'm not wrong. And she holds a PhD in translation studies at the Imperial College London. So that's why tonight we're going to need all your experience and knowledge. And I want to ask you, since you're focusing part of your work, or the majority of your work on audiovisual translation, which of course presents some difficulties and differences from translations of narrative and literature in general. What are the gains and losses that you have experienced while translating humor from a language to another?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, congratulations to the organizers of this event, and thank you to the editors of this issue, and really my warmest congratulations. Now, I'm not an expert in humor studies as such. I've been working with humor tangentially, as so to speak, and I'm interested in humor problems in connection to more general cultural problems. So now, what I find in my experience, what I found most interesting was were cases in which humor is introduced by the authors in a let's call it lingua cultural context. That is a context in which linguistic problems and cultural problems are, as it is often the case, intermingled. So, for example, as most of you know, I've always been interested in the varieties, especially linguistic varieties, especially varieties of British English or social varieties. The cases in which I have most focused on were the cases in which humor is triggered by this kind of situations. In a way, it is one of the examples that you have mentioned, that Martina Di Tizio has mentioned with The Office, is exactly what I'm interested in. Not only the clash of varieties, but especially the clash of varieties with people speaking the same language. So people speaking English, but one of them is speaking with an accent and the other is speaking with another accent. And what do we do in translation? That's what really I find really compelling and well, I don't have an answer, unfortunately. And especially we don't have the time to look for answers here. But I just want to say that this is one of the most interesting problems for a translator to solve. Varieties and humor triggered by people, characters speaking different varieties. The other hurdle, the other problem that I find interesting to solve in connection with humor is when authors create humor by using what we call what some scholars, including me, call allusions, which includes quotations, but sometimes they are not overt quotations. They are, as I say, allusions to other works of art, works of fiction, thus creating an intertextual connection with other texts. I have an example of that. I would like to show you a very brief clip, but what I mean to say here is that I'm not, unfortunately, offering solutions, but more than that, I have to confess that I'm more interested in the cases of translations which you shouldn't follow. I'm more interested in what you shouldn't do than in recommending what you should do. I'm more interested in encouraging students to see what has been done, and which is not necessarily wrong, but it's certainly very often in audiovisual translation very brave indeed. We have, as many of you know, in Italy, a tradition of dubbers and adapters, and adapters for dubbing, especially, also for subtitling, but especially for dubbing, who have taken questionable, to say the least, who have decision and chosen paths which have brought them very far from the source text. These are the cases which I like to analyze with my students, and of course they offer food for thought for their own translations. Now I'm showing you one of my favorite examples. Which is taken from, I'm so sorry, I don't know what is happening. Which is taken from a film by Woody Allen, a very old film, one of the earliest film by Woody Allen. And I hope you can see, I put the English subtitles, which, as you know, are mechanical and are not very good, but just to help you. I hope you can see everything. This was taken from, I'm still sharing the screen so that I can show you the transcription. This is taken from The Sleeper. So just a moment, I'm very sorry, I'm very sorry.
No, volevo sapere I prezzi.
Sì, devo arrivare tra voi 3-5 minuti.
Va bene,
arrivo,
grazie,
arrivo.
Grazie.
Arrivo subito.
We're sorry, Professor.
I'm so very sorry. I'm so very sorry because I'm also running a contemporary art gallery. That's the reason.
Wow. Bello della diretta, as we say.
Yes, that's sì, il bello della diretta. Yes, and as I was saying, this is the main point is that this film by Woody Allen, this scene in particular, is built, as you've noticed, around a main intertextual allusion. That is the allusion to a streetcar named Desire, a very famous play by Tennessee Williams, which I'm sure everybody knows, but which is particularly ingrained in, let's say, the American consciousness. It's like in Italy, I promessi sposi, let's say, and nothing can compare to how this play is famous in the United States and with an American audience. So even if we know it, we cannot maybe relate to it as well and as much as an American can. So what do you do with something like that? With something which is so ingrained, so embedded in a source culture. You may have noticed, but perhaps not, that in the second part of the scene, the actress Diane Keaton is playing the part of Kowalski, one of the characters in the play, by imitating the Marlon Brando and the way that he famously acted in this scene. Well, what the Italian adapters chose to do, incredibly, was to change completely the allusion and to turn it into a macro allusion to, as you can see, The Last Tango in Paris by Bertolucci. Now, there is no time, unfortunately, to go into the details of these, and not because they want to know the prices of the paintings, but because I've been allotted only 7 minutes. But so we cannot go into the details of this, but I just wanted to show you how an allusion such as that poses a big problem. What do I do? Do I ignore the fact that another audience, let's say in this case, the Italian audience, will not understand completely every little detail of the illusion? Do I know that? Maybe today that's what one would do. Generally, this is the case. We keep the illusion and we say, okay, let's hope that the audience will get it. Or, as in this case, do we change completely and we create another web of association, another set of association? This, I must say, was brilliantly done. It is brave indeed to change Woody Allen's text in such a way, but this was brilliantly done, and everything works perfectly. Also because Marlon Brando was a character in an actor in The Last Tango in Paris. So also the second part of the scene, when Diane Keaton imitates, works perfectly in Italian. That is, I think, all that I have to say. These are, I think, the main problems that we have to think about more than try to solve here and now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And if there be any question at the end of the event, we will call you back. But
I'll leave you just for 1 second, but then I'll come back.
Thank you for your contribution.
I'll be back.
And for your time. And I will, let's see. All right. So since I like this mixing of scholars, professors, and students like us, like me, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Elisa Orsetti, the other author that will present her article today. And I will ask her something about her work too, if I find her. But it's she.
Can you see me?
Yes. Now I'll put you on screen. And here you go. Thank you very much for being with us and welcome. So we wanted to ask you, I'm going straight to the point because we are running a bit late. We wanted to ask you, so translation happens to be very deceptive or tricky in some contexts, as we have just seen with the example that Professor Anzato showed us. In your article, especially, you compare the dialogues of one of the most famous sitcoms of our century, which you will name, and you will do like the spoiler to everyone. So you compared the sitcom with the fan sub version. So the question is, did the fans do a good job? And secondly, do you think translation can have an impact on the characterization, on the shaping of the characters themselves?
Okay, so thank you for your question. Okay, hi everyone. So spoiler alert, the sitcom is The Big Bang Theory. That's it. So to answer your first question, yes, I would say that fans did a pretty good job, considering that the official dubbed version basically neglected the main features that help convey humor in the original version, as we will see. As you can easily imagine, fans are a rather demanding audience and want the mediated product to do almost justice to what the original does. Therefore, it comes as no surprise that the fan sub version was much more meticulous than the official counterpart. As for the second question, yes, I would say that, of course, the way in which you translate has an effect on the characterization of characters. What comes to mind, for example, is a study I read last year. It was written by Martinez Sierra, and in his article, he basically analyzed the American sitcom The Simpsons, and he decided to investigate the Spanish dubbed version. The study was very similar to mine because he identified the main differences between the original version and the Spanish dubbed version. And one of them was the translation of culture-specific references. What he hypothesized after he identified this difference was that maybe this sort of simplification of the original version may have had an impact on the characterization of the main characters of the show, and that this characterization may have changed the way in which the audience perceives the product. In other words, he said that in Spain, The Simpsons is mainly targeted to a younger audience, whereas in the US, this product is meant for grown-ups because they can understand certain references that children cannot understand. And I would say that maybe a similar reasoning could be applied to my case study. So the Italian dubbed version, as I found out, actually normalized and simplified some aspects of the original, and such as, for example, culture-specific references and register variation. And these aspects may have changed to, may have led to a change in perception of the official product that has been commercialized in Italy. In this way, maybe the Big Bang Theory in Italy has become a much more of a mainstream product rather than something that can be targeted to, I don't know, very specific fans or nerds, as we would call them. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, perfectly. And I thank you very much. And as Martina, we will see you, as with Martina, we will see you in 10 minutes in the workshop. Here you go. Here we are all together. We have reached the end of this first part of event, so the launch of the issue, and there is time now for some questions, if there are any, from the audience. Questions, contributions, anything, suggestions. If there are questions, I ask you to say the name of the person to whom you want to address the question in order not to create confusion. Good evening.
Can I just start?
Of course.
Here, right? I'm sorry because I came late, but I was intrigued by what Elisa just said about the Big Bang Theory and her projects, and the fact that okay, she also analyzed, she also took in consideration the analysis of the Spanish translation of The Simpsons. Although there is quite a lot already written on the topic, even into the Italian dubbing, but she might also take into account Balirano's paper. I think it was published in 2015, if I'm correct, no, 17 maybe. And he actually mentioned the way that the first series of Big Bang Theory was retranslated because, redubbed in Italian, because many of the references to the geek kind of word, you know, the word of physicists, etc., were not properly addressed, and they are part of the humorous layout and, you know, the general plot and narrative of the series. So it was very important. Then I was wondering, what series did you analyze? I mean, did you go, did you select papers, I mean, some of the episodes from specific seasons, or what was your procedure for the analysis. Thank you.
Okay. Basically in the article, I just selected 2 examples, but the article, it's just an extract from my master's thesis. So in the master's thesis, I took into consideration the entire first season of the Big Bang Theory. And I mainly focused on the first 9 episodes because they were the ones that were actually redubbed.
Okay.
But actually, I analyzed all of them. So throughout the thesis, I actually took into consideration also the following episodes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both to Professor Dore. Thank you. I see you there. And to Elisa. So we, as I said, we were running like 10 minutes late. So I thank you everyone for your time. If there are no more questions, I'll wait 1 more minute. If not, I just want to thank you, each person that has contributed, even in the minimum part, to the creation of all of these and the event and the issue, because the transition team is very proud of what the project is doing. I say the project, say the whole stuff behind it. And thank you to the professors for their time. We value a lot your words and your time. It helps us enhance the project. And I will say to the audience, stay tuned, because we will stay here at the same link in 5 minutes for the beginning of the workshop in Humour in Translation. And I thank you very much. So
thank you.
See you in 5 minutes. If any of you wants to disconnect, and use the same link to go back. Otherwise, just have a coffee break and then we'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you, Aurora. Thank you.
So I think we've had the time to have a break in the middle. I ask the audience to maybe turn on the cameras or say something in the chat if they're back and if they're ready for the workshop, in so much as this is going to be something useful for them, for those who required the auto credit and also for those who didn't. But thank you very much. I see you all connected. So first of all, I hope this is going to be really interesting because it's going to be practical and we're going to have a close insight to the case studies that we have mentioned before during the launch. And I'm going to give you some general instructions on about the response paper that we require for the auto credit, but I'm going to do so at the end of the event. And we are also going to send you an email with all the instructions in detail so that you have all clear and written down. So I say a warm welcome to everyone again. I don't know if there are new people that weren't with us before. And I would say let's start with our great Verdiana that is going to introduce what we're going to do, the choice of humor studies as this interesting field, as we've seen up to now, when it comes to translations, what happens, and she's going to give us some tools and tips for the upcoming workshop. So thank you, Verdiana, and go.
Okay, here I am. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Perfect. I see you nodding. Okay, back again and welcome to the ones who weren't with us before in the launch event. And I hope it's going to be fun, interesting, and exciting to translate humor and see how it was translated. So first of all, as we already spoiled, we are going to deal with some extracts from the same case studies that were that Elisa Orsettis and Martina Di Tizio dealt with in their papers. And so we are gonna deal with what is the field, what is known to be the field of audiovisual translation. But I want to put the attention on the fact that it's not gonna be necessarily, when it's audiovisual translation, it's not necessarily an interlingual translation, so from one language to another, but as we saw before, it can also be an investigation within the language itself, so between different variants and accents of one of the same language, and how they deal with the different humors, because as we said before, American English and British English are the same language, but they just refer to pretty different cultures and societies and culture-specific preferences. So what I want to stress is that it has been a great opportunity to work with Humour in this issue, because it gives us the opportunity to do a practical workshop, which is something very interesting, because we have the chance to put into practice what we have talked about in the previous hour. Yeah, we will just I will just be brief and just leave the word to the others, but what we are gonna focus on is all the difficulties, so all the game of gain and loss that we face when we deal translation, audiovisual translation in this case, and because we always have to keep an eye on what is the language, of course, but then what are the culture specific references, and what is the tone of the language, what is the register, and what is the humorous intent that passage, that dialogue, for example, wants to convey to the target audience. And we also have to keep in mind that we always have a target audience, so that depends on different cultures, different languages, different ages also, so we have to direct our messages in the best way possible. And as I want to quote one of the main scholars that I'm sure each one of us has heard while studying with, I don't know, Professor Ranzato, or even just dealing with audiovisual translation, that is Patrick de Valdescoa, that he says that language of sorts most likely result in humor of sorts. So every language, and this is what also Professor Mary Wardle was saying, that what makes me laugh not necessarily makes other people laugh. So we also have to take this into consideration. And one of the last thing I want to say is that an important tool that we are gonna put into practice now, it's also that of the translator's creativity, because that is, I think, fundamental when translating and when, in the case of humor, when trying to render a wordplay. So as it was the example brought by Professor Wardle again before, we also have to do the translation in the best way possible, and at some time at the cost of completely change what was the reference. So as we said also in audiovisual translation with the passage on the movie Sleepers by Woody Allen. So I will just leave the word to Aurora again, and let's start this amazing workshop.
Thank you, Veriana, for your introduction. And we're going straight to the exercise with Elisa Orsetti that has introduced and announced her work before. I'm just going to show you briefly her work first. Wait a second, there's a microphone on. All right. So I just want to show you Elisa's work on the Big Bang Theory. The title is Dubbing and Fast-Humping Humor for the Italian Audience. And you will find this in on our website in the section of the issue of May. So Elisa, I would leave you the floor. I know you're going to share some slides, right? Okay. And
okay, yeah. Shall I share my screen?
Of course you can.
Okay, just a moment.
No problem. And for the people that are going to write the response paper, I encourage you to take some notes, because then you can write on it and take some inspiration, and you can quote or cite the work. Okay. So sorry, Aurora, I think you have to put me like as organizer or something. Yes, I'm going to give you authorization. Here you go. I think you can do it now. Okay. Right? I feel like an organizer now, yes. Okay. Okay, can you see the space? Yeah. Okay, it's here. Okay, I'm gonna try and put it in presentation mode, hoping that that's perfect, Elisa. It's not a disaster. Yeah. Okay. Perfectly. Okay. Okay, so let's start. As you know, my name is Elisa Orsetti, and basically with this presentation, I will talk you through my paper entitled The Big Bang Theory, Dubbing and Fan-Subbing Humor for the Italian Audience. So I would like to start by saying that my essay is concerned with the translation of humor in audiovisual text. To address this topic, I decided to analyze the Italian dubbed and fan-subbed version of The Big Bang Theory. As many of you may know, The Big Bang Theory is a famous CBS production which portrays the nerd stereotype by telling the story of four Caltech researchers who can somehow easily untangle complex physics concepts but lack basic interpersonal skills. This condition is exemplified by the character of Sheldon, who you can see on this slide sitting on the sofa in a green t-shirt. Sheldon is characterized by a number of specific traits, namely opposing change, behaving in obsessive compulsive ways, and most importantly, being unable to understand humorous and ironic utterances. All these features posed a few challenges throughout the translation process, as you can imagine. So to try and tackle these issues, I decided to carry out a comparative analysis of the Italian dubbed and fan-subbed versions of The Big Bang Theory. This examination allowed me to observe two recurring phenomena that had been handled very differently throughout the two adaptations: the rendering of culture-specific references and register variations. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I see a message in the chat. It doesn't change. Sorry, because it's changing from here. It works for me.
Okay, if it doesn't, if it's not a problem, I mean, I can just keep it like this if you want.
I think Lisa that it works, but Turan, can you?
No, because I know that my computer sometimes has this problem, so I was just waiting for this kind of message to pop up. If you want, I can keep it this way. I don't know.
No problem. We see it clearly this way as well. So
okay, all right then. So the rendering of culture-specific references and register variation. So as for culture-specific references, we can say that, to keep it short, culture-specific references are all those linguistic and extra-linguistic features that indicate the foreignness of the mediated product. In this domain, dubbers and fan-subbers opted for two very different strategies. So on the one hand, the Italian dubbing tended to domesticate culture-specific references. And we can clearly see it in this example, in which Klingon bogle, an expression that is solely available to American speakers who are familiar with the board game Bogle and the Star Trek reference Klingon, was rendered in the Italian dub version as Risico and Scarabeo. Instead, the fan-sub version actually opted for a solution that helps preserve the culture-specific reference, while also possibly hindering understanding for the target audience. Here we can read Paroliere Klingon. As for the register variation, I selected this example. So register variation was mainly analyzed in connection with Sheldon's characterization, because it's a very peculiar character. It tends to speak basically as if he were writing an academic article. So the way in which he speaks doesn't really respond to spoken language norms, and often engenders somehow unintentional humorous situations, because as we know, register is also a feature that can easily convey humor, especially if it is misused. Register variation was another field in which dubbing and fan-subbing really differed. So in the dubbed version, actually, register variation was somehow simplified and normalized. Here you can compare, for example, the original version, they're both curry-based cuisines, with its Italian dubbed counterpart, il curry impazza da queste parti. Instead, the fan-sub version actually tried to retain register variation, giving fans a more rounded depiction of Sheldon's character. So just to sum up these two examples that we have just seen, we can say that all in all, the dubbed version and the fan-sub version actually conveyed two very different translations of the original. On the one hand, the dubbed version tended to domesticate culture-specific references and simplify the original register of Sheldon. On the other hand, the fan-sub version tended to preserve source text references by choosing foreignizing solutions and retaining register variation. These two strategies actually respond to very different needs and choices. On the one hand, the dubbed version, at least in my opinion, was looking to satisfy marketing norms, was trying to basically make the product accessible to as many people as possible. And by doing so, they tried to normalize it and simplify it. On the other hand, the fan-sub version was trying to satisfy the needs of a very peculiar market, so fans. Fans are usually able to notice if something has changed, if the original version has been somehow altered. And that's why most of the culture-specific references that we see in the fan sub versions are not really very distant from their original counterparts. Now, if you want, I can start with the translation workshop. This is more like a hands-on part of the presentation. So basically, I selected for you two examples. The first one has to do with culture-specific references. And I'm just gonna try and give you maybe a few hints and maybe describe the clip very quickly. Because I just put the picture there because due to copyright reasons, I couldn't really find a very short clip of this video, but if you need it or want to watch it at home, I can just provide the reference in the chat later. So just to give you a little bit of background, in the first exercise, we're dealing with a very strange situation. So in the picture, you can see Sheldon and his friend Rajesh, who are wrestling. So basically playing arm wrestling while playing Tetris at the same time. During the match, Sheldon utters the following words: "We might as well stop, it's a stalemate. You're beating me in Tetris, but you've got the upper body strength of a Keebler elf." Now, I would say we can maybe try and translate this short extract. And if you need it, I can provide some help. So first of all, maybe I would say, let's concentrate on the culture-specific reference, which is, to me, the most difficult part of this translation. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I wanted to make it into something with participation, but I don't know. Shall I just do it? Okay. Just a moment, because I have to. Okay, go ahead and speak.
Yes, I just wanted to give an idea. So since this is a very practical, meant to be a practical exercise, I just wanted to suggest that whomever wants might type down their solution, the translation solution in the chat. So that we can see, we can give like, I don't know, maybe like 3-4 minutes. I don't know if that might be sufficient time, 5 minutes to say the maximum. And then we can see what solutions people come up with. Of course, this is not mandatory, but it might be interesting to compare some solutions.
Yeah, sure. We can see the solutions, and then I'm gonna also show them maybe the dubbed and fan sub versions, so that they can.
Okay.
Yes, that's perfect. And I'm sorry, I was trying to solve some technical issue.
Okay, no problem.
People who asked me about this screen sharing. And according to this, maybe we will ask you if we can provide them with the slides later on. Like if we can give them a summary of the slides so that they can still work on them.
Yeah. I can share them now if you want.
No problem, Elisa. We will send it by email, via email.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, sorry, just notice for those who do not speak Italian, of course, if you want, you can provide the translation in your own language and then give us a back translation so that we know what solution you came up with in English.
we've got one suggestion. I don't know, Elisa, if you saw it already.
Okay, just
Or we can wait for one more if you want to. I like the Topo Gigio thing, but that relates for sure to some cultural reference. I do not know if it is international actually, or how is it called in other countries.
I think it's just Italian, but maybe I would look for like because basically the Keebler elf is like mascot, no, for cookie company. So I would look for something like that. I don't know, like Pominolo Hacker. So I think that Topo Gigio is something that is small because basically it's saying that he's weak.
Something small and weak is
small and weak, and that can sell products. I don't know. That's it.
If you want to show maybe the first.
Okay, I'm gonna
actual translation or actual
very slowly. Okay, so this is the Italian dubbing. So since I got to this slide mode, I'm gonna create suspense. So basically in Italian they said aspirabriciole. Of course, it's not a culture-specific reference, but it renders the idea that is very weak. And then in the fansub version, they said the folletto della Keebler, which is not very surprising actually. But okay, so basically here, once again, they keep the original reference, but maybe people in the audience cannot understand what they're talking about. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking that maybe by reading Folletto della Keebler, because in Italian folletto is also the vacuum cleaner, so one might think about a vacuum cleaner rather than an elf. So and it's fun that aspirabriciole, the solution provided in the dubbing, is a very weak vacuum cleaner thought for tables.
That's so cool.
So this is a kind of a cross reference, and which turns out to be involuntarily funny.
This is mind blowing.
That's what came to my mind as well. At first, I thought about the vacuum cleaner, not.
Okay, so we're talking about vacuums now.
Yes.
Okay, shall I read other solutions? I don't know.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead. I think people were a bit shy at this first example. Maybe they will be a bit more collaborative.
Okay, right.
Or maybe it is a bit difficult for them.
Yeah, it's not easy.
You can share your own mother tongues. Of course, it is still an international exercise.
Okay, so maybe, I don't know, I go on with the next example, but if someone wants to share their version of the first exercise, more than welcome, okay. Okay, the second one has to do with register variation. So basically here we got the scene in which Leonard and Sheldon meet their neighbor Penny for the first time. So in the original version, we read this dialogue. So, new neighbor, evidently, significant improvement over the old neighbor. 200-pound transvestite with a skin condition. Yes, she is. That's it. Have fun.
2 minutes.
Okay, I think that here maybe we should focus on this sentence, so significant improvement over the old neighbor, and maybe also comes to mind is also skin condition, which is quite an unusual way of saying like skin problem or cellulite. Yes.
I have a question. So the skin condition is relating to cellulite, not other skin conditions.
Also other things. I was thinking cellulite because I'm biased because I read the translation.
Okay.
But it can be referred to other conditions, of course.
I can just I'll just say my
Yeah, sure.
opinion. So I think that I would translate it in to make it sound a bit disgusting. I think maybe I would leave the 200-pound transvestite, even though it's it might be a bit offensive. And skin condition, I think it could be translated with like dermatite or scabbia, something that relates to skin. But
okay, all right. Which is still quite specific.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Okay, let's see if I got something in the chat. Con un eczema, okay, all right.
Yeah, we were speaking about Sheldon's register, so I thought he would use kind of very specific disease words. And
I think it's correct. It's more like a diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly.
There's like a scene, the one where he doesn't understand sarcasm, and he speaks. You can watch it for reference. He speaks to his neighbor Penny, and somehow he doesn't want to insult her, but he ends up insulting her because he is talking about her health conditions, but in a very, very specific way. Looks like a doctor when he speaks.
Okay. We can show the...
Okay, reveal. Ok, as for the Italian dubbing, we got la vicina che c'era prima l'hanno rottamata, si accettano trans di 100 kg con la cellulite sulle guance.
Oh.
Okay, so very rough.
And then about also on the let's say offensive or not offensive.
Yeah, they're very offensive to also minority groups in the dubbing in other sections. And then Italian fan subbing, un miglioramento significativo rispetto al precedente vicino. Il travestito di 90 kg con una malattia della pelle. Okay, it's much closer to the original version, but of course doesn't really make you laugh out loud.
Yes, I think for this example, for this extract, the first part, the first version, sorry, the Italian dubbing, the original one, is more, it has a bigger impact. It makes you laugh. While the second one, it's more literal translation. And here we can see the problem of translating humor literally, because in English that was fun, but it is no longer so like fun in Italian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also, the Italian dubbed version wants to make you laugh, but in another way. So in the original version, they want to make you laugh because they say things in a very polite way. They use these words, these great words, but then in the Italian version, it's just like chiacchiera da bar, basically.
Yes.
Okay. And with that, I actually finished the workshop. I'm gonna see if there are some maybe messages in the chat.
Yes, there are. There are some comments you can.
Very sassy in the Italian version. That's right. Maybe they made you laugh, but they made you laugh for a different reason, I would say. So better job, yes, in the sense that they made you laugh. But to me, it's a different type of humor. I don't know. It's a bit sexist. Okay.
Yes, those were the comments, and I hope the other students who did not contribute to the comments, and I hope they were able to take some cues of your approach to translation. and to take notes on about the theoretical concepts that you shared with us, so that they will be able to use them in their papers.
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much, Elisa.
Thank you.
Big thank you. Now we'll now give the floor to Martina for the second part of this workshop.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I will first show to the audience, as I did for Elisa. I will show the article, How to Be Brits with Words, a Speech Act Analysis of the Opening Scene of BBC 2's The Office and its NBC remake, by Martina Di Tizio. You can find it in the same section as the other one, of course. Martina, if you need to share the screen, I'm going to give you the rights to do it.
Yes,
to be able to do that now.
Okay, so I'll share right now. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes, Martina.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So what I wanted to do first is just trying to introduce what speech acts also are. So in my analysis, I identified the speech acts in the shows, and I've noticed that the characters use different speech acts to convey comedy, but also a certain aspect of their personality. Now, I want to do something similar with you. So we're going to identify speech acts in comedy, and we're going to use another scene from The Office. And they're actually two scenes. So you're going to see the British, actually the American version first, and then the British version. But first of all, I wanted to quickly explain what speech acts are. So starting from Austin theory, he theorized that there are certain sentences that we say that are not just statements, but they also perform an action. Okay. So he defined these as performative utterances. An example, very easy example, is a priest that says to a couple that is getting married, hereby name you husband and wife, for example. And so he doesn't just say that, he marries those people. So that's what he meant with performative sentence. So here I'm using Searle 5 categories for speech acts. So the ones I've just explained are declarations. So they are speech acts that change the state of the world immediately. So as I said, if I am a priest and I have all the requirements to marry people, and I say the formula, and or for example, I am the person getting married and I say the formula, I do, for example, then something happens, I get married or I marry someone else. Then we have the biggest group, which is they are the assertive speech acts, which commit the speakers to something being the case. So they are the biggest group because they are usually statements about a situation. So for example, they usually state a truth, but I can say, oh, I am the best chef in the world. That's an assertive speech act. That doesn't mean that it's true, that it's objectively true, but I am stating the truth of the statement. So I am, it's committing me to something being the case. Then we have directed speech acts, in which the speaker commits someone else, the hearer or someone else entirely, to do something. So this is the case of requests, commands, orders. So for example, please get out, or can you open the window? So that's a directive. Then we have commissive speech acts. That's where the speaker commits himself or herself to do something in the future. So for example, promises. Oh, I promise I will do this later. I promise I'll tidy up my room later. Then we have finally expressives, which convey the psychological state of the speaker. So that means all statements that start with, I think that, I feel, that, for example, I'm sorry, that's an expressive. Now, I want to give you some examples of speech acts. So let's start from the declaration one. So in the declaration, we read, "You're fired." Now, I have a question. Please answer in the chat. It's a very simple question. So if I am an employee, simple employee, and I say, "You're fired," to another employee that has the same role as me, doesn't have anything above or below, he's just an employee, just like me. If I say "you're fired," does that mean that the person gets fired? Yes or no? It's really easy. Okay, chat. Okay, no, good, great. Okay, now other question. If I am the boss or the supervisor and I have all the requirements to fire someone and I say to an employee, "You're fired," does that mean that possibly that person is getting fired? Okay, great. All right. So yes, so these are declarations. We have to have all the conditions to make to perform this action. Now, let's go and read all the rest. So we have an, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. So we have an assertive. This is your last day at work. It's a statement. We have a directive. Please pick up your stuff and go. I'm telling someone else to please pick up their stuff and go. Then we have a commissive. I'm going to have to let you go. And then we have an expressive. I think you should go. Now, another question. Do they mean all different things, or all these actually mean the same thing? So, for example, yes, good. Exactly. So if I say, "Please pick up your stuff and go," it's still the same as "you're fired," even if I am the boss. But it's a directive because a declaration are usually formulas. Okay, so declarations are usually not that important, and the distinction between them and the other speech acts is what is important. Now, I'm going to very quickly show you this scene. Don't worry if you don't understand everything. I have a script afterwards. Just watch the scene and then you tell me what you think. Okay, so I have a question. Have you found this scene particularly funny? And if you do, you can also say why. Yes, not at all. Yes, it's not really funny. Okay, I would say no from my point of view. Not really. Okay, I have a question. Why did you find it not funny? So if you feel like there's a lack of jokes or punchlines, or because the situation is not funny at all, someone being fired, God, that's not funny at all. Okay, Parisa, but him being serious makes it funny for me. Julia, it is funny in the way that it is annoying. It gets funny when you get to know the characters. Okay. It's Michael Scott making everything so funny, yes. Not him laying a joke on Pam, but him thinking it's funny, and the silence is funny too. Okay, yes, exactly. So as you can see, the scene is not humorous in itself, but it retains some humorous effect by the fact that he is serious. He's trying to stay serious, and there is the silence as well. But now I have to say, so we have, oh, sorry. Okay, so here we have the script. So I've marked down some speech acts. So for example, oh, hey, do you like the Jamie Kennedy experiment? So here, Michael is using cultural references to give a frame of what he wants to do, punked and all that kind of stuff. This is really in a character with Michael Scott, because he uses lots of cultural references, lots of accents as well. So he tries to give a frame to something before he does it. So here I point out just to have a seat. Now, what kind of speech act is just to have a seat? For example, a commissive, am I committing myself to do something, or is it a directive? I'm telling someone to do something. Okay, yes, good. It's a directive. Just have a seat. So here we have some examples. And then we have, I'm going to have to let you go first. So in this case, is it a directive or a commissive? I am going to let you go first. Okay, good, it's a commissive. And then I want to point out another thing. What about why? Well, theft and stealing. Do you think it's a directive, commissive, or an assertive? Okay, good. It's an assertive. So he's stating something. Even though he's lying, he's still stating something. Well, theft and stealing. And then he says, you know, we're gonna run us out of business, Pam. So this is another assertive. And she asks, are you serious? So she asks for confirmation. And then after he says, so just clean out your desk, I am sorry. Now, just clean out your desk and I'm sorry are two different speech acts. Can you tell me what kind of speech acts they are? So, yes. Good. So the first one is the directive, clean out your desk. And the second is an expressive. So I am sorry. I feel sorry. Then I'm just going to, and then she tells him, you're a jerk. Okay. Yes, directive expressive. So she tells him, you're a jerk. Oh, I don't know about that. And then the scene ends. Now, as we said, there are some things that makes the scene humorous, but the scene is not in itself very funny. Now, I want to show you, if I can manage to do that. Okay, I want to show you the clip from the British version. Okay, all right. So now I want to ask you something. Was it more awkward, this scene or the American one, in your opinion? Or what you perceive as awkward and embarrassing? This one was strange, yes. Okay, this scene, yes, I agree. And I agree because, yes, the British version is, I would say it's in, most important. Oh, sorry. Okay. It's actually, yeah, more awkward, there's more silence, because that's one of the main points of British humor. It's way more awkward, there are longer silences, and the characters don't want to be lovable, they are not lovable. And we can see that in, wait just a second, because it doesn't let me, okay. We can see that in the script. Okay. So here I'll just go straight onto the last lines. So he says. Yes, there is no sense of humor. He says there was a joke there. Good girl. It was a joke we were doing. Well done, settling in. Whereas Michael, is way more upbeat about it because he wants her to see the comedic point of what he has done. Whereas, for example, in the case of David, he doesn't acknowledge that. He is just he doesn't even try to make her see that it's a joke. He realizes that it was a very, very terrible joke. And he also, in this, thanks for this, check them out, better do this actually. He is trying to ignore this, ignore the situation. And she tells him, just like the American version, you're a jerk. She says, you're a wanker. But then she says, you're such a sad little man. And I think that's where the British humor is more connected to. So to the sense of awkwardness, of I think that British humor is much more black. Yes, that's true. It's way darker than the American version. The American version, that was perceived as a small joke, whatever, oh, you're a jerk, that's the end of it. Whereas in the British version, there's a sense of being miserable that is pointed out by the scene, by the long silence. And this is the last thing that I will point out. All the things that I have highlighted, they are all the same speech acts. So they are the same categories. So the scene is almost identical, but the result in the humor is, I think, much more different. And I think that's it, because it's almost time. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. That was really interesting, and I saw that people were interacting with us. I'm really happy about it, and I hope it's been an enriching experience for everyone. So thank you both, Elisa and Martina. The editors, I've already thank you. And lastly, I will call Julia in order to draw some final considerations from her part. And then I will say have a good night and go have a nice dinner. So if Julia wants to, I will put you back into the normal view. Here she is.
Yes, thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you to our guests who have been both extremely exhaustive. And that is the reason why I did not actually find much to add. But I would like to stress the importance that translation studies and humor in translation studies can bring to the academic field, because we have to keep into account how much of the target culture and the source culture we have been taking into account while translating. It requires a very deep knowledge of the field you are translating to, and the deep knowledge of your audience, and the pragmatic component of the discourse. Much of both our guests, I'm sorry, of what they've been saying has dwelled much on the pragmatic point of view. And of course, the translation and the humor in translation has been defined as something that is impossible to translate just as much as poetry. And I think that finding the balance between loss and gain in this case is something that is really challenging, and it's really, really interesting. And you can always add something to a translation. There is no perfect translation. You can just keep on reading and reading once again your translation. I assure you that this is what is happening to me while translating for my thesis, and you will always find something more to add. And each culture can bring something to it. So I think that it's really interesting, other than funny, for both translators and those who observe humor translation.
Amazing, amazing. If there are some comments from the public or from the students, I know that 15 of you are going to write this paper to gain the OTA credit. It's time for questions. Oh, thank you. I'm reading some comments in the chat. You can also speak up or raise your hand if you prefer. Yes, The credit is given after the response paper. Like you have to write the response paper, give it back to us. We are going to, like, editors and Professor Plescia, who's the chair of the project, are going to read it, revise them, and correct them. Thank you, Sara. So about the response paper, yes, focus. It has to be around 3,000 words and about a related topic or about one of the two articles, if you prefer, if you don't have any other ideas, sorry. But we're going to send you an email with written details and instructions so that you have everything clear, and also like with an expiring date or with a deadline. Michela, I see you have raised your hand.
Yes, just a quick specification, because I don't know if this is clear to everyone. We had a pre-registration for this workshop because we only have a limited number of papers which the professor and us can correct. So the number of participants is those who will receive the email with all the specifications, because it was a closed number, a deadline. So I just wanted to remind you of that. So in case you don't get disappointed if you don't get the email, but you should have been informed by the HR team that will send you this email. And so we are sorry that we cannot extend the number any further, but there is of course a limit that we have to the people available to correct the papers. This is only due to that. And the other thing is the word count is 2,000 words, but the important thing is that you will find many references in the articles. So in the papers provided by Martina and Elisa, you will find all the list of reference that they used, and you can choose to do your response paper either on a pragmatic analysis on the model of what Martina did, or on an analysis of cultural specific references and the audiovisual translation as Elisa Orsetti did. The important thing is that you had your own list of references. You can also expand it, of course, but for the paper to be valid, of course, it has to have a proper bibliography on which to base it. And you will receive all further details via email, as Aurora already said. Thank you.
Thank you, Michela. Eleonora said that we contacted the people who were eligible for the credit last week. So if you've received the email, then you are among them. So I thank you very much. It's time for everyone to go have dinner. And I hope you enjoyed the event as a whole. So now you can also read the whole issue, as I said before. And thank you again. See you to the next event of transitions.
Sorry, Aurora, can I say one last thing?
Sure.
Sorry, I just want to remind everyone that if you found this project exciting, and we hope you did, there is a call for applicants open for specifically now for the editorial group, so for the group of editors, but new calls will open soon, so just stay tuned. And if you want to participate, just go on the transition website and you'll find under the announcements all the new calls coming out. And go there also, and of course download the issue and just read it. And if you want to share some feedbacks with us, just email us and we will be more than happy to know what you think about the papers. And thank you all very much again for your attention today, for your time.
Thank you. I will close the room for everyone. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.